Good afternoon, families, parents. We are here at another Family Friday webinar. We're going to let everybody take a minute or two just to get settled and logged in. It is officially noon, and so we'll get started at 12:01.
So happy to see you all here. Can't wait to see you in person soon.
Yeah, we're officially less than 1 month away from orientation, so we're really excited.
Time flies when you're having fun, Sherry.
100%.
See parents coming in, families coming in to our webinar.
If you're just joining us, we're just giving everybody a minute more to get settled in, and we will get started in just a few moments. Okay, it's 12:01. So officially we're welcoming you back to our Family Fridays webinar series. I'm Sherry Obrentz, Associate Dean in the Office for Undergraduate Education, joined by the more famous Sherry on campus, Sherry Ibrahimi, Director of Conference Services and Housing Administration. Today we're talking about housing, res life, and dining, really important topics we know that you're all interested in. As always, if you have questions for our panelists or that you'd like for us to answer live, please post them in the Q&A. We'll be monitoring that throughout. And without further ado, we're going to jump right in, introduce our panelists, and get started.
So happy to see you here. I call myself the other Sherry. Sherry Obrentz is the OG Sherry here. But this is my favorite webinar because I work mainly in housing operations. I've been helping with parent and family programs over the summer. But it's going to be, hopefully we'll answer all your questions and get you all really excited about your students home away from home. I'm joined today by Scott Roush, who is the Senior Director of Emory Residence Life and Sorority and Fraternity Life, and Chad Sunstein, who's the Director of Emory Dining. And they are just two of my most wonderful colleagues here on campus. So today we're going to give you just a brief intro into housing here at Emory. Scott's going to talk about residence life and all of the wonderful things that happen programmatically inside of our residence halls here for your students. And then Chad's going to talk about campus dining. We'll also go over some important dates. And again, as Sherry said, hopefully answer your questions. Feel free to type them in the Q&A. So basically, your student should have received, except for there's a small portion still waiting for assignments, but on July 15th, their housing assignment for the academic year. We have 10 first-year residence halls. There's a big myth that, oh, there's the freshman quad, and if my student isn't there, that's where all the first-year students are. It's completely a myth because the Complex Harris hold about 450 of our first-year students, it's a huge chunk, and Dobbs in Alabama another few hundred. So that's a myth. I'm going to go ahead and stab right here as we get started. But we have 10 residence halls. We have a great partnership with our building and residential services. So our custodial service team, they come in and clean the common areas of these residence halls, the common area bathrooms 7 days a week. If your child was assigned to, or your student, I'm sorry, was assigned to a suite, the custodial staff do not clean those suites. So, you know, some people ask for suites. Honestly, as a first-year student, I would have rather had the others because I wouldn't have to worry about cleaning, but that's something that you need to keep in mind for move-in. Maintenance requests can be found on your student's My Housing page, the link. If they have a maintenance request, let's say a light bulb, you know, goes out and they need that replaced, or there's something wrong with the blinds in their room. So your student is able to turn in those requests on their own. And don't worry, the RAs are going to go over all of this with them, and the RAs are there as a resource. But just so you know, as parents, this was the request in the beginning before we released assignments. We don't allow students to request certain buildings, and all of our buildings are wonderful. There's amazing communities everywhere. But your student, requested a type, and we did our best to honor that. We did not honor most of our requests for single rooms. We just have a very small supply of those. And this year, what I've seen is a trend sort of as after COVID, we have more students requesting that than we did before. But rest assured, they're going to have a great experience. This fact has sort of held true for us for many years. About half of our students request a roommate ahead of time, and about half don't. So that statistic has gone up and down maybe 4 or 5 percentages over the last 7 or 8 years, but hasn't really varied from half of our students match, half of them don't. Next slide, Sherry. So next week's webinar is my second favorite webinar of the summer, and we're going to talk about moving in. We try to make this a great experience for everyone, but you're going to receive specific instructions for how to drop off, where to park, and there's going to be lots of helpers, movers, helping you get your items up to the room. So that's all coming. What I would ask right now is that your student on their My Housing page, when they got their housing assignment, they could also sign up for a time spot to say when we should expect you for move-in. So we try to stagger it for ease. So the earlier you go on and pick, maybe the more choices you'll have with us assigning you a time for move-in. So please make sure your student has done that. Packing, what to bring. We do have this on the housing website if you have questions, but here are some things that we think are useful. Families, you might want to emphasize the cleaning supplies there. That's certainly what I'll do in a couple of years with my teenager. We don't allow candles in the room, extension cords, Wi-Fi routers. There's Wi-Fi in all of our buildings, and so we don't allow sort of separate networks. And then obviously for safety, open coiled appliances. We don't want any little mishaps. There is a community kitchen in every building, so I think that's something for you to know. If they need to cook ramen at 3 in the morning, there is a stove downstairs and a microwave downstairs if you don't have a micro fridge to do that.
I'll add one other thing about the packing list. In the Emory Welcome app, under the move-in and living on campus section, we had one of our students add to the what to bring list to kind of a packing list that includes some things around clothing and some other fun stuff. And so that's live in the app too. It's a really great list if you're really wondering what are all of the things I should bring. That's there too.
Okay, here are some important dates for you all to keep in mind. And I know Sherry and I mentioned on an earlier webinar, like wait till after add drop swap to figure out sort of flights home in December, because it may be that your student has really early finals and you might have a different, choice for flying home, or your student.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I just realized that all of these dates are 2022 dates. So we will update these specific dates.
Oh no.
Then when we repost our slides. So they're all a little bit off, but we will make sure that these are all up to date.
That is my bad for not catching that, Sherry.
Good. It's hard. It's so hard to keep it up to date with the year to year.
But it's December 14th, which is the day the halls close, right?
Yes. So final exams are actually going to run, everything's one day, a little one day off except for January. Final exams will run from December 7th through the 13th. And we'd ask all of our students to be moved out for the winter break by the 14th at noon. And so again, we'll make sure that all of these are up to date. The biggest thing really is that our residence halls are open, and Jerry, you'll say this, throughout the fall semester up until then. So for fall break, for Thanksgiving break, if students need to stay on campus, that's absolutely okay.
Any questions about dates, feel free to throw them in the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer. I think the other key date you all may want to know now is when we reopen for the spring. So I'm going to look at my 20-year planner here and look at 2024. And for next year, it's Sunday, January 14th. Okay, Sherry, next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott now. He's going to talk about his amazing staff that live in our first year halls and work with your students.
Hi, everybody. As Sherry mentioned, my name is Scott Roush. I am the Senior Director for Residence, Sorority, and Fraternity Life. And we are excited and getting revved up for all of you to show up to campus in the next couple of weeks. My role in this and Residence Life's role in this is to create community and the living spaces where your students will be. And there are a myriad of folks that will help you do that. The first one is our complex directors. And there'll be the next slide, I think, has some pictures of those folks, but they are master's degree professionals who have chosen this as a career path. They are our supervisors of the 2 student positions that you'll see underneath. And they are there to be essentially the adult presence in the building. So if there are things that your student needs or things that they're not seeing, if they're having issues in their room and they've submitted a work order and it hasn't been completed, or they're having a roommate conflict, or they just need someone to talk to, the complex director is there. Those staff live on campus. They may not necessarily live in that specific building, but they have an office in each building, and they do live on campus. They are also on call 24/7, 365. We have a professional on-call staff member every single day of the year. To be able to respond to students in crisis or if they have a specific need. The 2 other positions on this slide are student positions. So our resident advisors are juniors and seniors who have applied and gone through an interview process, and their role is to be mentor, friend. They have a piece where they're upholding policy and making sure that the standards that everyone agrees upon are being upheld and managed in the building. And so they do everything from help your student figure out what classes to take, to making sure that quiet hours are enforced and that it is an environment where folks can live and learn and study in harmony, or as close to harmony as you can get when there are 300 people living in the same space. They're fantastic. There are in the first year area, there are about 100 of them, and they work really closely. The ratio of student to staff is roughly around 35. And so it is a really tight-knit community with the RAs. In this picture, you can see last year's sophomore advisor t-shirt. I'm currently modeling this year's sophomore advisor t-shirt. So trying to make sure that we're all, you all got to see that first. No one else has seen that but you. So the 113 of you on the call, consider yourselves privileged. Our sophomore advisors are our sophomore students who just came out of their first year, and they live on the halls to be that help and sage to understand how to go through the 8-month experience that is the first year at Emory. They're really there to do social programs to help students feel connected. They will take a lot of your students to places like the club fair or to the dining hall to help them know where their classes are. They're a good reference to how the year is going to roll. What did you do for Thanksgiving break? What, those sort of questions that students may have. The essays are there. We hire them in pairs. There are 88 of them, and most of the floors will have 2. That's not every floor, but pretty close. that have two. And our essays and the first year students really connect, and they again are just there to be sort of a first friend for your student and a good guide for them at Emory.
I'll just add that it's just such a cool, unique thing. I think the sophomore advisors that Emory does, and every year I'm so impressed by this group of students, the RAs too, and your professional staff. But it's just so great that sophomores want to have this position and live back in those first year communities too. So lots of layers of support there.
Absolutely. I think we can.
Oh, sorry.
So these are the lovely humans that fill the complex director position for each building. As I mentioned before, each one of them has gone to school to do this. They've been, and actually, interestingly enough, this is a returning group of folks. Most of them have been here for more than 2 years. And so they are, by our standards, they're really strong veterans in the work that they do and in the buildings that they work in. They have been working all summer long to get everything ready from a programmatic standpoint. They've been helping and train the RAs who will return in about a week to get everything ready for your students. And so they're on our website. If you have questions about your specific building and want to understand something that they may know, please feel free to reach out to them. They will respond to you and get back to you. And it's also just good to introduce yourself and let them know who you are, because they're going to be a partner in making sure that your student is supported while here on campus. We can move on, Sherry, to the next slide. And so we do a lot of things over the course of the year to make sure that your students feel connected, that they are engaged. Part of it is specifically done in the first year experience. So we will do a 5-week kickoff where that first 5 weeks of school will be doing something pretty much every day, but pretty close every 48 hours or so. There are things for students to do, whether it's a meeting to talk about a specific thing that's going on. They'll do roommate agreements with their RA. We'll have floor programs, rule conversations about how to respond to fire drills or weather related things, because that's a thing that happens in Atlanta. We, as anybody who was here yesterday knows, sometimes we have thunderstorms and knock down trees. And so we make sure that the students know where to go and how to process through that if the weather kind of comes through. They will run Songfest. Songfest is a giant event that we will do the first week of school on the Thursday night. It's really hard to describe. The best way I describe it is it's sort of like a giant lip sync competition meets band competition. So it's a lot of choreography, a lot of dancing, a lot of singing, a lot of school spirit. It's a lot of fun. And I encourage your students to participate in that. We will do a thing called swoop chats, which is where several times during the year, the RA will meet one-on-one with your student and just make sure they're feeling good about the things that are really important to them. So are they connecting socially? Are they connecting academically? Where are some places that they feel like the connections aren't as strong, and we can connect them to resources that will assist? Or, again, that's something about like, oh, I really wanted to do this first year seminar and I didn't get it. What's another class that might fill that void? And the essays and the RAs are really good at being able to articulate those things. And then as a bookend to Songfest and some of the welcome events, we will do a first year farewell, which is sort of like welcome to being a sophomore. So it's really about mirroring the experience of graduation for our first year students as they transition into year 2. And then this will look different. In particular, each building has a different experience as it relates to the weekly community gathering events. Sometimes they're really formal in a sense that like they happen at the same time every week. Sometimes it's just like, hey, there's this thing that we're going to do. Sometimes it's going to be on a Wednesday. Sometimes it's going to be on a Friday. If you're in the lounge at this time, please enjoy it. We have a series of programs that our RAs and SAs are required to do, and so they will do those. Sometimes those are floor related, sometimes those are building related. And then we started last year where every hall does its own signature program twice a year. So once in the fall and once in the spring. And so those will range from going roller skating as a building to having, we had an Olympics that sort of happened outside on the quad. We had a camping event where students were able to come out and sit on the quad and roast marshmallows and do sort of things like that. So they really do vary depending on the building and the identity space. And students are allowed to go to multiples. They can go, if your student is really ambitious and wants to go to all of them, they can go to every single one that happens in the fall and in the spring. But it's a really great way for us to connect with them and to find a way for students to feel supported and engaged and have something to do on a weekend or a weeknight. Other than study. Yeah, so just some things about safety. So our buildings are what we like to call double locked. So we have a double door system for students. They have to use their Emory card to get in. Every residential student will have access to every residential lobby. So your student has an ID, they can get into the lobby of any first year building. But then there is a second door that goes to the residential section of the building, and only the students who live in that building have access to that space. So they'll swipe into the front door and then they'll swipe into the residential space. We give students individual keys for their rooms. I will say it now, and it's always something to say, please have your students lock their doors. It is the one thing that if I could magic wand for everyone to know and do, it is that so much can be eliminated if their doors are locked when they're not there. But just make sure we do give that to students. And then around campus, we have blue lights, which are direct lines to our campus police. There are several locations for them around campus, and if a student feels unsafe at any particular time and they see one of those lights, all they have to do is hit the big red button on them, and that will connect them directly to our Emory Police Department, who have, I think, an under 2-minute response to anywhere on campus, and so they will be there relatively quickly. We do have a Live Safe app that we will talk to students about. That's also changing, but we will make sure that students know the change, and we will make sure that that app is changed. It will be Live Safe when we start school, and then it'll sort of change over, but we'll transition your student through that. Again, as I mentioned before, RAs are on call every night the buildings are open. So every night that we are open as an institution, there's an RA on call from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. Those phone numbers are posted all over the hall. The RAs will give that to the residents on the very first day when they get here, and they can call that number and an RA will respond and get them what they need. That can be from anything from a lockout to a question to, oh, I'm having an emergency and I need some assistance. And then again, as I mentioned before, we have a professional staff member on call 360, so that 365 days a year. So there's always someone that's on campus that can respond in a professional manner if necessary. And then I think we'll talk about that. Maybe it's the next slide. Also, our Emory Police Department is available 24/7, 365, and can assist with students if they are in need. We do encourage students to advocate for themselves. We will provide them with the tools to manage the things that they need. I do understand that, particularly with first-year students, sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose with resources, and so you're bombarded with those resources in day 1 and day 2 of orientation of your arrival on campus, and sometimes it's hard to remember them. So we are here as Residence Life to remind you, to help you, to give you advice on what those are. But we need you to speak about it. It's hard for us to always be able to predict it. And so if your student needs something and they're not sure what it is, pick up the phone, call their complex director, call their RA, and we can, or call their SA, and we can get them the information they need so that it doesn't get out of control. And they have been suffering in silence for 3 months, and then they call us and they're like, this is the worst place ever. It's been 3 months and no one's ever talked to me. And we're like, well, did you call us? And they're like, no. And it's hard to, so call us early and often. We're here to answer, we're here to help. We also can do wellness checks. So one of the things that can happen, you can either call our office in the housing office, or you can call the Emory Police Department, the non-emergency line, which is down there on the screen, and say, I haven't heard from my student, in 24 hours. I'm really concerned. Can someone go check on them? And we will do that. And we will go in and check on them. And then either more than likely what we do is to tell them to call you and to say, hey, they're okay. If they're in class or if they're unable to do that at the moment, then we'll call you back and we'll say, hey, we checked in on your student and they were good to go.
So Scott, I'm going to jump in because we have a ton of questions in our Q&A. I'd like for you to start to talk about renting the micro fridge and fridge for the rooms. And then I'd also like, as parent or family member wants to know, they haven't been able to get in touch with the roommate. If they go ahead and order their micro fridge, does the micro fridge company then know that one person in the room has done it and they wouldn't let the other person run it so they don't wind up with two? Those are the two micro fridge questions I have for you.
Yeah, so if you just go to Google and you Google Collegiate Concepts Emory, it will bring you to the website where you can order your micro fridges. I was going to post the link in the answer to the answer to that question, but for everyone to know, if you just, all you got to do is pull up Google, type in the words Collegiate Concepts Emory, and the link will come up for you to click on it and to order a micro fridge. So that's the easiest way to do it. Collegiate Concepts is the company that we use, that actually is the vendor that has the micro fridges that we rent for students. The second answer to the question is ultimately no, because we do have rooms sometimes where students do have two, where a student wants one and another student wants one. That is actually able to happen. But if it is a thing where you only want one and you end up ordering two, we do have an on-site service technician that if you cancel your order, we will get the other fridge removed within like 48 hours. In addition to, if you have a micro fridge on campus and it breaks, and you go to the Collegiate Concepts website and you enter that you have an issue with your fridge, we will get it fixed or replaced within about 48 hours. Sometimes it could be 72, but most times it's 48. I manage that pretty closely to make sure that you're not going a long time without a refrigeration or the ability to cook ramen at 3 in the morning, as Sherry had mentioned early on.
It's an important thing, Scott.
Conversation.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to power through some of these other facility questions. So we told like long extension cords, but yes, you can have power strips. They need to be UL rated. So that's sort of the safety threshold for us with power strips. Nicole asked, can dorm residents receive Grubhub or food deliveries? Absolutely, yes. And many of our students do that. I think that's a great conversation for you to have with your student ahead of time. Are neon and LED light signs permitted? So no, not like the individual like neon sign on the wall. I know I've seen some of those in other campuses when people are decorating their residence hall, but safety is very important to us. So no, LED light bulbs and lamps, of course, but not the freestanding. I think you're talking about the freestanding neon sign. We don't allow, so if your student was assigned a suite and they're responsible for cleaning their own bathroom, we don't allow sort of outside vendors to come into the residence hall to clean those spaces. It's, safety and liability are very important to us. And so that's something that we don't necessarily permit. All of our halls do have water stations where your student can fill up their water bottle with filtered water. Sustainability is really important to us here on campus. So we encourage folks to have their own water bottles and fill them up with these stations inside the residence hall. So someone asked about Raul, but that's for all of our buildings. Railings are provided for the beds that you loft. If it's not there at move-in, you're able to put in a work order and get that. And you can lower your loft. When you check in, there'll be a station there where you can ask for assistance in lofting or de-lofting your bed.
Sorry, that was amazing. I think we've got all micro fridges, power strips, signage. The last one was about decorations like doormats and things outside of the room. So
yeah, so I answered that one. I mean, the answer, so I was going to hit some of these that I can answer. So the first one is yes, you can have a doormat outside your room, but it's important to understand that for the majority of your spaces, they're going to be in a common hallway. So I can't promise they will stay there, but you can definitely have it. It's not prohibited. It's not a prohibited item.
Scott, my hesitation about that is that our BRS staff do vacuum the hallways, and a mat outside your room.
Students do have them. I just want to say students do have them.
Okay.
It is the thing that they have. They're not prohibited necessarily. I wouldn't say that it's necessary, but it's not a prohibited item. Also for package, someone asked about packages. So your student will have an MSC address, which is their mail stop address. So they would put, if they're buying Amazon or you're buying Amazon for them, using that address, which will ship it there, they'll get a notification from the mail center that they have a package, and then they can go there and present their student ID and pick it up. That's how that works.
And all MSCs, the mail stop codes have already been assigned. They can be found in Opus.
Yes. There was a question about winter break. Will students be charged if they need to stay in winter break? What I will say for that is there'll be a process for students to go through to be able to stay for winter break, but there is no charge if a student has to stay. So more on that. But the answer sort of generally right now is no.
Back to the microfridges, Scott. Can students bring their own? I know the answer, but just to make it clear.
A student can bring a fridge. They cannot bring a micro fridge. The only way to have a microwave is to go through the rental company that we use. But small mini fridges are allowed to be bought and brought to campus. And then there was a question about the fraternity rush process for students and when that takes place. Both for first year students, both fraternity and sorority rush as it relates to what we would call Panhellenic sororities and IFC fraternities will happen in January when students return to campus for second semester. We have what we call delayed recruitment, which is we let students get acclimated and have a semester to get under their feet before we do recruitment. For our NPHC orientations, our traditionally Black fraternities and sororities, and our multicultural sororities and fraternities, those also happen in the spring, but they happen later, and they're sort of chapter dependent. So we'll have several info sessions, get-togethers that will happen both throughout the fall and at the beginning of the semester that will share specific information about how to register for those things and how to participate. So more to come on that, but it does for the most part happen officially in January.
This was a great question about bicycles. Atlanta's a very hilly place. So just know that if you're bringing a bike to campus, make sure it has gears. But the question was, how many students bring bikes and where do they store them?
Yeah, students do bring bikes. We have several. I would say the answer to storing them in their room is, I would say no. The rooms, it's just a really tough thing to do in that space, especially if you're sharing it with another person. We do have several bike racks that exist in the spaces around the campus. And one of the cool things that exists in Monroe, actually really right behind me here, is a location called the Fixie, which is a student-run bike swap shop fixed place where students come in and get their tires repaired, talk about things that are going on with their bikes. They have weekly meetings where they get together and do rides and things like that. But there is plenty of bike storage space on campus if you want to bring a bike. I couldn't tell you the number of students who bring bikes. It's not huge, to be honest, but there are a number of students who do it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's the most bike friendly campus in the world, just because of the way that the pedestrians and things are mixed in with the bikers. But we do have students who do have bikes and they do use them to ride. There's a lot of trails and spaces for students to ride that are campus adjacent and in a short distance from us to Atlanta. So Atlanta is a bike oriented town. I wouldn't say it's a bike friendly town, but there are lots of bikers and lots of places for you to ride.
Awesome. Sherry and Scott, I'm going to let you continue answering a lot of these questions in the chat as we move on to dining. There also are a lot of questions just about the move-in process experience, things about storage and packages. I don't want to delay too much, but next week we have an entire webinar dedicated to move-in, sending packages, all of that. We don't want to steal the thunder from our mail services friends either. So we'll answer these questions as we go, but want to turn it over to Chad now to talk about Emory dining.
Great. Hi, everybody. So we wanted just to dive into some of the basics about dining, especially as a first year on campus, because there's a lot to it. There are 2 plans available to select for a first year student. Most students would be selecting meal plan A, which consists of unlimited meal swipes. And when we say meal swipes, that is to be used to utilize the DCT, which is our dining commons. It's our all you care to eat facility on campus, open 7 days a week. There is also meal exchange locations. And when we say meal exchange, that is when you use a swipe at places like the Emporium, if they're on the Claremont campus, if they have friends at Woodruff Residential. These are locations that you could use a swipe in place to get a basic meal, usually consisting of an entree or a sandwich and a salad, a side like chips and a beverage. Students also receive $150 per semester. That is our declining balance tender, which is tax-free and holds a 5% discount. And this is when student wants to go to a coffee shop or a cafe. We have a lot of coffee on campus,
Here's my
where
call
they can
these.
utilize this. Yes. And we have a large variety of places to go across campus. So when they don't want to go to the dining commons and they need a break from that, they have some options for retail as well. In addition, there's also 16 guest swipes that students receive with a meal plan A or meal plan K account. And this is used for their parents or friends or family. So it's a good opportunity if you're here during move-in, especially from the 20th on, if you want to come see the dining commons in its full offerings, please take them up on utilizing some of those guest swipes because it is quite a few. And then also things like family weekends, another great opportunity, or any other time you're on campus as well. And meal plan K is essentially just meal plan A, but also provides access for students that observe a kosher diet to the kosher station, which is card access only. It's a gated space. So the DCT, all you care to eat facility, we just talked about the meal swipe component. And here's some of the basic hours for the DCT, which is essentially the hours that you will see almost all year. There are some changes when it's close to some of the breaks, but this is pretty much the hours that you will see every week. There is also many stations that offer a wide variety of diets. I saw a comment, this is a shellfish, tree nut and peanut free facility altogether, but we also have an avoiding gluten station, for example, that if your student has severe gluten allergies, celiac, they would contact us to gain access to that station. It is another gated station as well. Stem to Root, which is on this picture, is a completely vegetarian, vegan, plant-based station, but we also have plant-based offerings throughout the facility, as well as various offerings during the less occupied hours as well. We can go to the next
Chad,
slide,
can you
please.
answer some of these
Yes.
questions live? Can you talk about, I'm sure you all, I think Dining posts the menus every week for what the
Yes.
DCT, and that's
That
on
is correct.
emorydining.emory.edu.
Yeah, if you go to dining.emory.edu, you can go to our locations and hours. It is a weekly upload, so closer to when the academic year starts, you'll be able to review that. But also students can sign up for an email to receive the menus via email. You'll be able to filter it out by certain allergens or preferences as well.
And that'll list all the hours as well. Someone asked about dining before 10 a.m. on the weekend.
Yes, that is correct. And there it will be options like the Emporium, for example, on the weekends is opened earlier. If there are the students that are up early, like athletes, for example, that have a lot of practices before the DCT opens, that helps accommodate that. Freshmen, correct me if I'm wrong, Sherry, they have access to Woodruff Residential.
They do.
Yes, so they'll be able to eat there if they want, see friends. You do have to swipe to get into the DCT, even if you're not eating. But once again, especially if you're a first year student, they have unlimited swipes. So they could go 50 times in one day if they would like. And they can utilize those swipes. They do not go down.
Can you
So
talk
there's
about
a-
how dually dollars roll over, Chad?
Yes, I'm glad to talk about that as well. So dually dollars carry over from the fall semester to the spring semester, as well as through the summer. And then they close out in early August before the next academic year starts. They do not carry over from academic year to academic year. Students can also add dually dollars at any time through the My Housing portal if they have any issues adding them and they're in $25 increments. They can also reach out to our office either by phone or by email, and we can assist with that as well. I see a question about Eagle dollars as well. Eagle dollars are a separate currency that is through Emory card that is primarily utilized for things that you don't eat and drink on campus, primarily for printing services. For example, they can also use them in the vending machine like you can for dually dollars. And I believe they are starting to add back on off-campus vendors as well for Eagle dollars.
And Chad, you might get to this, but there have been some questions about cafeteria style dining versus others and how many cafeterias there will. So just maybe setting the stage for the DCT and then some of the other dining options as well.
Sure. Yes, so the DCT once again is an all-you-can-eat facility. Not necessarily kind of the layout of a traditional cafeteria. It's more of a food hall, but it is an all-you-can-eat facility where students can take as much as they like, as well as we do have a to-go option for students in a hurry. It is our one all-you-can-eat facility on campus, and that's why we have some meal exchange options in other spaces, but it is centrally located very close to where first year students will be living. We have a number of retail locations. We have 17 retail locations on campus, primarily things that you would think of as cafes, coffee shops, as well as a large food court that is Cox Hall, where the clock tower is, that has a lot of vendors that is geared towards very fast retail options, primarily for students that are, you know, second years and up that have declining balance to utilize. But there are a lot of options, and then the DCT as a whole accommodates a large variety of options. And yes, I saw the question about, yes, you can filter different allergens or food preferences when you see the menuing online. And we do have gluten-free options. We have a dedicated avoiding gluten station.
I think the question was, are there other good gluten-free options at the other locations besides the DCT?
Yes, there are obviously some. They can't be as guaranteed to be at the same extent from a production standpoint, like you would in any retail location, but there are avoiding gluten options as well. If there is, I saw specifically like an athlete, for example, that has some very specific requests, that has some allergens, they can reach out to us and we can connect with our registered dietitian. Which the information is right on the screen right now. So this is more of a chart, what I discussed about the dually dollars versus Eagle dollars. You know, besides, so the simplest way to think of it that I like to say is dually dollars are for when you're getting something that you can either eat or drink, because they do also hold that tax-free status as well as a discount. An Emory card is helpful for some of the off-campus vendors, going to the bookstore, printing services, and they do carry over year to year until you graduate or leave Emory.
Thank you so much, Chad. Such great information. I will say that the dining at Emory .edu website, or dining.emory.edu.edu, is an amazing wealth of information. So much of this can be found there. Hours were a big thing, guest swipes, things like that. And so encourage you to bookmark those websites if that's something that you want easy access to as well. All right, y'all have been asking great questions in the Q&A as well. And our final segment of today's session is really helping your student adult with some things to think about before coming to campus, especially now that most roommate assignments have been shared, or housing assignments should be shared too. So Sherry and Scott, I'll kick it off and you chime in. This one is my favorite. Please clean your room and do your laundry regularly. Many of your students have been doing this since the 3rd grade, and that's wonderful. And for some, this might be the first time that they're responsible for doing it, but this is really important part of adulting, and it's everybody's personal responsibility to get that taken care of. Anything that people want to add about laundry, cleaning room, and I'll add in there like showering, personal hygiene as well.
One of the match questions on your students page, if they matched with if they didn't pre-match with a roommate, is like, how often do you clean your room, right? But I think one thing about living in the residence halls teaches you is to take care of your space, right? So I think some of this will come when they move in. I think of all of these things, Sherry, the thing that resonates most with me when I talk to and work with our students is that roommates don't have to be your best friend. Don't come in with these super lofty expectations of my roommate is going to be my best friend. I think it's more often than not, when you then choose to live with your best friend, it's not always the best scenario. Like, you want to be comfortable with this person, where, that you share your home with, and respectful. Both of you will learn a lot, but sometimes people need sort of space, as well. And, I think you're less likely to be disappointed if you come in with the mindset that your roommate doesn't have to be your best friend, right? And of course, from our safety standpoint, please lock your door. Please make sure your student takes their keys with them, and talk to them about this, because this is the one thing that shocks me the most on the housing operations side. At the end of the year, people move out, they don't give us their key, and they let us know they haven't had their key for months. Woo! As soon as your student or the roommate loses their key, they need to let us know, because we will change the locks, and it's our procedure to change the locks immediately. And we don't want anyone to ever be unsafe at any time. So please encourage them to always lock their door when they are not in the room, and keep their keys on them. So, if someone tails someone else into the residence hall, and unfortunately, that can happen. Nothing is missing or stolen.
And the question just came up. We've been mentioning locks a few times. Should they be concerned? I don't think this is a concern issue. I think this is a life issue. We live in a world where we just have to be aware of our surroundings and our belongings and other people. Learning how to lock doors and keeping doors locked is just part of where we are. And so I think we have a really safe campus. Scott, Sherry, Chad, I think there's lots of opportunities to be safe. But this is just good practicing. Most of us live in neighborhoods in the country where we lock our doors. So it's good to practice that in your residence halls as well.
Yeah, I mean, so to address that, I think particularly, the unsafe or crimes, if you want to use that word, that happen on our campus are crimes of opportunity, right? Somebody leaves a laptop on an open space in the dining hall or in the library or out on an adjacent building, and and someone just walks up and sees an unattended laptop and takes it. And I would say that's the piece for the key, right? If someone's walking and just thinking about something that they want to take, and they hit your door handle and it's locked, they can't do anything about that, right? But if the door is open, then that just presents, an additional set of issues. But I would say the campus is really safe. Again, we have lots of security measures in place. And so I don't think it's an issue. It's just something that we try to reinforce as a responsibility piece. For laundry, there was a mention about laundry. The laundry fee is encumbered in your housing fee, so there are no additional quarters or swipes that a student needs to do for laundry. They can just go down and use the machines. All the buildings have a set of washers and dryers. And then my sort of piece of advice on all of this is that it's, we ask roommates to do roommate agreements on the very first day and walk through kind of what your expectations are and how you want to live together. And the two pieces of advice I will offer there, as someone who, the one constant fight in the 20 years of my marriage is the fact that my wife is from Nova Scotia and I was born in the South. And so we fight over 3 degrees on a thermostat. And it is one of these things that, you're not always going to get the exact environment that you want to live in because you're living in it with 2 people. So ultimately trying to figure out what are your non-negotiables, what are the pieces that you really need, and working through those so that and understand that it is a shared living space. And that sort of goes back to all the things that Sherry mentioned about cleanliness and hygiene and those pieces, because if you take those pieces out of the equation, it really does sort of boil down to sort of idiosyncratic things that you can live with or idiosyncratic things that you don't want to live with, because those other pieces aren't getting in the way of it. The questions at the bottom, I think, again, talking about ground rules, that's always really important. And also know that, like, one of the things that we try to do is understand that ground rules are they're negotiable, right? Like, just because you set ground rules on August 24th doesn't mean that those are the ground rules that are going to stay until May 15th, because your students are changing, their lives are changing, they're getting used to being at college. So they may think that they get up early and go to bed early, and then they realize that that is not a thing that really works for them at college. And so then they need to continue to communicate that with their roommate as their expectations and that orbit in the life that they have on campus changes. And then the thing about eating off campus, and I don't know if Chad has a different thing for this, it's really a personal choice, I think, both budgetarily and in style. When I was in school, we sort of, Sunday night was pizza night because the dining hall was closed, and so everybody kind of ordered pizza and we shared pizza in the residence halls. I will tell you that there's a lot of off-campus food that comes in through residential and campus programming. So if students want to eat at Fox Brothers or they want to eat at Chipotle, more than likely there's a program happening on that day that has that food. And so they don't necessarily have to purchase it or budget for it. They just show up to something and they'll feed them. And so that's a thing. I will say, the one sort of semi-challenge about where our campus is located is there's not a lot of off-campus food that's within walking distance of campus. There's our Emory Village, there are several restaurants down there that they can go to. But, so eating off campus is also, the additional expense there might be to have a delivery service or to have to take an Uber or one of our public transportation pieces to those places. So just as long as you're factoring in all those pieces, then it's really up to the student.
The other thing is, Scott, we mentioned this, that all students have card access to the other buildings. And so how do you go about making friends outside of your roommate or outside of your hall, and can people come to visit? And I love that question. So maybe we could.
Yeah, the answer is that there's so many ways. Whether it's class, whether it's, jobs that they might get, the clubs and organizations they might be a part of, a program that they went to. Orientation is a good time. Folks in your orientation group, it's a good time to meet folks. We have no official visitation rules as it relates to campus. So it's not like, you can't come after midnight or you can only come after 8 p.m. We really allow for the students to control, very much like they would in their adult lives, when folks can come see them. If someone wants to come visit the residence hall, that student, of course, can get into the lobby, but the student has to come down and let them in to the residential part of the building. And then just like they are at your house or in any other apartment. You know, if a student from Raoul comes to Terman Hall to visit, the student who is in Terman Hall is sort of the host and responsible for that Terman, for that person. So just making sure that they're just being responsible when folks are in their spaces. And one of the things that can be an issue is that sometimes you have your new friend over at your room all the time, and just know that that's probably going to grate on your roommate a little bit. So just being conscious of how long and how often you have, maybe go over to their space occasionally, or meet in the lounge, or meet at Caldy's, which is open late, and they can have coffee and hang out. There's lots of different opportunities for students to meet. There's two questions I wanted to handle that I saw. One is, can someone bring a mini laundry machine? The answer to that is no, please don't do that. Secondly, it was a question about underage drinking. How is it handled, and does it occur? The answer is yes, it occurs, because this is America. But the second piece of that is the way that we handle underage drinking is that we follow the law. And so if you are under the age of 21, you're not allowed to possess or consume alcohol. And so if our RAs will find you with that, they will have a conversation with you, they will document it, and then you will have a conduct hearing that will have some sort of repercussion to that. We understand that students are going to experiment and do the things that they do with alcohol. So it's not one of those things like we're constantly searching for alcohol. We're not knocking on doors on Friday nights and asking people if they're drinking. But what I will say is, if you draw attention to yourself or you overindulge with alcohol, we will find it and we will take care of you. We will make sure that you're medically and physically safe. But then there'll be some accountability measures that will play into that on the back end. And that's really with any item. So also with tobacco, which is prohibited on our campus. Any other illicit drug, which is also prohibited, those are prohibited on our campus. So we sort of we follow the federal and state laws as it relates to those things.
Can we talk a little bit about access to working out and other health facilities too? And I will just say, I always laugh when students say, I'm so far away from my friends. Our campus is very walkable and pretty compact. And so from the one residence hall end to the other with first year students, I think it's maybe a 6 or 7 minute walk total. But also access to kind of gym and other health spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I think our campus can feel, I think particularly on the Atlanta side, it actually doesn't, I don't think it feels far away from anything, because I think it does kind of fold off. It feels kind of, in my opinion, it feels a little congested, to be honest. And so the Woodpeck literally is in the middle of campus. And so it is one of those things that it's not very far. And I would say the same thing for the Dobbs Common Table. So the food, that they're literally across the street from one another. So the food and the exercise are there. I think one of the benefits of living in a place like Atlanta is that for about 6 weeks of the time that your student will be here, it will be incredibly hot and humid, but the rest of the time they can do a lot of exercise and things outside. There's plenty of outdoor opportunities. We don't get super cold in the wintertime, and so you can run. The campus has really safe sidewalks and cool paths to run on campus. We also have in our upper class facility another workout facility that's available if students want to take it on a shuttle and ride over to the Claremont campus. We have another gym and some outdoor space that has a pool and some volleyball courts and a full court basketball, as does the Woodpeck. So there are plenty of places for students to connect and engage. Our rec program has a full scale of classes like Zumba and weights and Pilates and things like that happen across campus. So if your student currently is in a yoga class or does aerobics, those things will also be available to them with their fitness pass.
Awesome. We are just at 1 o'clock, so we've gone over what we thought our expected time, but these have been really wonderful questions. I'll just remind everybody that the Emory Welcome app has so much great information. Lots of the things and lots of the questions that have been asked are addressed in the Emory Welcome app. You can always also email ec.orientation if you're having a hard time finding information as well. Sherry and I will be back next week to talk about moving and orientation. So lots of the logistics about moving in, all the support that's going to be available, packages, things like that. So this is open to both our family population and our students, again, arriving to Atlanta this fall. And then our final summer presentation will be about the Pathway Center and kind of that career exploration piece. So we hope that you join us. Big thank you to Scott and Chad for joining us today and answering so many questions. I think it was a record high for our questions today. And as always, my co-host Sherry, the other Sherry, the amazing Sherry, thanks so much for being here. We will update the dates on this and post these slides along with the reporting later this afternoon. So we hope you have a great one, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks so much.